Well, I think there still may be a couple of folks to come in, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Judy Braun, and I have the honor of serving on the Board of Directors for the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, and also chairing their Public Education Committee. And so, then I get the pleasure of welcoming you this morning and serving as your moderator. So two important things first that I want to start with. Most important thing is to thank you for coming. Typically we wait to the end to thank the audience for coming here, but I think it's so important I want to start right at the beginning to say thank you for recognizing the importance of this topic, the profound impact that domestic violence can have on the workplace, and thank you particularly for your colleagues back at work, because you obviously think enough of them to come and learn about how to keep their work environment, their living environment safe. So, most important, thank you. Second, most important thing at any conference, does everyone know where the restrooms are? Out the door to the left, and apparently there are some on the second floor as well. I'd like to, before introducing our panel, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the story on how we came to be here today and why we invited you. The Public Education Committee of the Domestic Violence Center started a number of months ago and identified two primary areas for our focus over the coming year. The first being dating violence, because of the staggering statistics of young girls and boys who experience dating violence. And so we've moved out to colleges and universities, and we've gotten into high schools to do programs. And as part of our explorations there, one of our committee members attended a program on dating violence that had a keynote speaker named Tracy Davidson. And we were just in awe of her articulate ability to advocate for violence prevention. So hold that thought, and I'm going to move forward to our second area of focus, which was workplace violence. And we said, well, what would be the best way to approach this? And the dream was shared on having a symposium to bring decision makers together so that they could go back to their organizations and workplace, share the information, and look at how to prepare for opportunity or for domestic violence in the workplace. And so along our journey of planning for this symposium, several blessings fell upon us. The first was we remembered Tracy Davidson and went back to Tracy and said, would you be willing to work with us? Would you be part of this symposium? And as we all would expect, her generosity was just amazing, and her willingness to be part of this event. So he said, well, this means we've got to move forward now. And then we talked with folks at Penn State for our location, and they were great in looking at potential rooms and where we could work the best, so we are ever grateful for Penn State as well. And in the meantime, our committee member, Sherry Peron, was diligently working on a presentation to be able to provide as part of the panel. And then another blessing befell us. We said, you know what, we need an employee assistance program. And we went to Bert with HMS Health Advocate and said, will you collaborate with us? And Bert and his colleague Marty Rosen, the Chief Marketing Officer at Health Advocate, raised their hands immediately and said, what can we do? We'll help with, we'll sponsor, we'll help with marketing, we'll do whatever. So we are grateful for that blessing as well. So that's what brought us here, and the blessings that we've had along the way. So why did we invite you here? First, we wanted to provide you some information, to fill your minds with some things perhaps you didn't know that you could take back to your work setting. Second, though, we wanted to pull at your heartstrings, to tell you some personal stories so you connect. And finally, to instill just a little bit of fear, because this is an issue, it's not about just one shooter in a workplace. It's about a profound impact of domestic violence that is at staggering proportions and is in every one of your work environments, whether you know it or not. And the issues of violence in the workplace, they are not rare, they are not distant. They are here, and they can happen in any one of our organizations. So we invited you here for those reasons, hoping that you would be moved to action when you leave, that you would be looking at what you can do differently in your work environment. And I know Sherry is going to talk a bit more about how the Domestic Violence Center might be able to help you with that. So that's how we got here. That's why we invited you here. And I'd like to just call upon the Planning Committee and those who are here, if you stand, just to offer our appreciation to all the work that they've done over the months to bring this together. And those individuals are Karen Elrod, Chief Mark Cosi, Terry Moody, Sherry Peron, Linda Tordone, and Dolly Weidman-Scott from the Domestic Violence Center, and Bert Alessia and Marty Rosen, and the whole team of health advocates who have been just wonderful support for us. So please, let's offer our appreciation for them. And before I get to introducing our panel, I do want to, Domestic Violence Center of Chester County is a nonprofit organization. And for us to do the work we do with thousands of survivors of domestic violence, it takes a cadre of people, a cadre of volunteers who offer their time, treasure, and talent, as well as a highly capable staff. And so I'd like to ask, so that we can appreciate you as well, for all the Domestic Violence Center volunteers and staff to please stand. Now, I've sort of already introduced the panel. I'm going to say a little bit more about Tracy because she's our first speaker. But our second is Sherry Peron, who is an advisory board member for the Domestic Violence Center. And to Sherry's left is Bert Alessia, who's our EAP specialist on the panel. And on Bert's left is Dolly Weidman-Scott, the CEO of the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. And Dolly will be able to be with us for answering questions at the end of the presentations. So I'm going to ask, we're going to have each presenter come up. I'll introduce them in between. At the end of all the presentations, then we'll take questions and answers. Okay? So our first speaker is Tracy Davidson. Tracy, who is a 5-time Emmy award-winning news anchor and consumer reporter for Channel 10 News. Tracy's been in the media industry for 25 years. She started out as a radio host in upstate New York, and since that time has won many awards. One including Best News Anchor Emmy for the Mid-Atlantic region, as well as the Woman of Distinction Award from the Philadelphia Business Journal. What you may not know is that Tracy completed a religious studies certificate at St. Charles Borromeo, and she's currently working on a degree in pastoral counseling. And finally, I know the Delaware Valley and the whole Philadelphia area is a better place because of Tracy Davidson, and we are honored and very grateful that you're with us today.
Thank you. Well, I myself am grateful to be here. I'm grateful for all of you who have come to learn more about domestic violence, and I'm grateful that you have resources here and in the audience that they're here to be able to share with you information. I need to start with an apology that after I share a little bit, I need to leave because we really thought there would be a verdict in the Priest trial by now, but we do not have a verdict, so I need to rush back to the station to be prepared for one. My life is sometimes crazy, and happily so. And people say, did you always dream of being on TV? Did you always dream of being an anchor? And usually I say, no, I never dreamed this big. And then I say, actually, the only thing I dreamed about when I was little was being safe. I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood. We had a beautiful home. We had a well-manicured lawn that my brother and father would mow on Saturdays. My brother was a year younger than I am. He played Pop Warner football. I was in color guard, and my sister was much, much younger and just had cute dimples and was really, really cute. Everybody loved her. And we on the outside had the most normal family, and even on the inside, my mom would do the grocery shopping. She would come 4 food groups on the table every night. We just always had to try it. That's all we had to do, especially when it came to vegetables. But if people only knew that at least once a week those plates would go flying. If people only knew that on the ceiling right above the table was a big spot where a hamburger landed one time. If people only knew that my brother and I still laugh and call each other up about songs that we know all the words to, because we would escape into his room to listen to music really loudly so that we wouldn't hear the screaming. And if people only knew that I would bring my little sister in my bed so that she wouldn't be scared. But the reality was, at 10, I was really, really scared. And by 13, my brother and I could pick a lock to get into Mom and Dad's room to save my mom. By 13, 14, we were seeing Mom fly across the family room, hit the wall, and slide down the wall to the ground. But to the outside, boy, we sure looked good. We sure looked like the middle American family. And a couple of years ago, when I tried to go and talk to the Rotary on the main line about domestic violence, I could see the little bubble thoughts coming out of their head. And they're like, yes, but this is the main line. It doesn't happen here. And I just wanted to go, it does. And there are police officers in your midst that will tell you it does happen on the main line. And in fact, that's the scariest call they ever get, is to go to a domestic violence call. So I assure you, it happens in your neighborhoods. And when it comes to stereotypes about the people, men and women, and the women who it happens to, my mom was what we would call today a soccer mom. But one of my dear friends is a business owner. And not just a business owner, she runs a personal training business. She is strong, she is powerful, she has people working for her. And all of a sudden we started to see bruises. Well, if you spend time in the gym like I do, you run into things. Okay. Until one night when I got a phone call, this is so-and-so from so-and-so police department, and of course me. Really? Seriously, who is this? No, actually, ma'am, I'm serious. I'm with your friend. She'd like you to come over. Well, she had been beaten one too many times and had locked him out, and he broke in through a window, cut himself, and there was blood everywhere. Like a crime scene I've never seen before. And trust me when I tell you, 25 years of reporting on the streets, I've seen some crime scenes. To the outside world, she had it. Don't hold to the stereotypes. And then I read this quote from a successful executive woman who says, I used to go to my office. I used to close the door, lie down on the floor, take a nap, because I'd been up all night being yelled at and worse. So, if it's happening in every socioeconomic place, if it's happening in your social circles, and trust me, it probably is. So in every neighborhood, in every social circle, there's a good chance it's happening to somebody in your workplace. Because this issue, this evil issue, does not discriminate. It can be found everywhere, and it's not always so easy to put into a little stereotypical, here's where it happens, here's who it happens to. It always extends past the 4 walls of a home. And it does extend into your workplace. 20,000 victims are threatened or attacked every year in the workplace, by a spouse or partner. And if you need a local example, it's only a couple of months ago, Delaware County, a Wawa, a woman who had been abused, left the abusive situation. But guess what? When the abuser doesn't know where they are at night, they know where they are when they're at work. and she had agreed to give him papers at the Wawa parking lot where she worked, and she was stabbed and killed. And it's not always the victim either. There's a powerful interview with a man whose partner 10 years ago in Vancouver was killed. He was the manager of a Starbucks. He went in one morning, opened up his store, and one of his employees, the husband of one of his employees, had come in, intent on killing her. He jumped in, and he was killed. And his partner says in the interview, he says, you know, when you're a partner with somebody who is a firefighter or a police officer, you have that angst. You have, like, I hope they'll come through the door again. He says, he was a manager at a Starbucks, and he didn't come home. This issue of domestic violence in the workplace is not new. A lot of people have been dealing with it for a long time. Back in 2001, Delaware Corporate Citizen Initiative and the National Workplace Resource Center on Domestic Violence actually developed a suggested policy. I mean, they made it really easy. It was a line, insert company X. Here's how easy it is. There are 21 states that have policies for their employees. And in April, President Obama signed a memorandum requiring federal agencies, so if you're a federal employee, to come up with a policy. But there's still sort of this great divide. There are companies, corporate cultures who care, and there are companies, corporate cultures who care about the bottom line and about we only want our workers to focus on work, and we don't really care what they do outside the workplace. It's just about work. We want them to be focused, productivity. Well, it's pretty short-sighted. It's pretty short-sighted. Number one, sometimes I relate that to the thought of 30 years ago, drunk driving. Charlie will get home. He's always drunk. He always finds a way to make it home. Until we realized, yeah, there's more than Charlie on the road. And then it became more than just Charlie's issue about getting home safe. It became all of our issues. So then we all stood up and said, no more drunk driving. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Because if you think that person is being the most productive they can be for the bottom line, they are not. If you think their friends or their coworkers who know a little bit about something that's going on and they're trying to sort of make up for that person's shortfall when it comes to work or trying to support that person, do you think that they are being as productive and contributing to the bottom line as they can? They are not. So even if you're only focused on the bottom line, this is something that you have to look at. You have to know that the domestic violence extends beyond the four walls of a house. And look, when we talk about it, and you're going to get you have a lot of experts here who will be able to tell you very specifically how to do this. And we're talking about a shift in culture. We're not talking about doing something that costs money. We're not talking about touchy-feely. The CEO of Liz Claiborne was once quoted as saying, the key is companies don't have to get into the business of domestic violence counseling. That's what these people do. They need to get into the business of letting women know the workplace is a safe haven. So, again, what does that look like? It's not touchy-feely. It's not like every morning we have to have a sharing circle and a kumbaya. No. It's about changing the culture so that people, everyone knows that it's not a taboo. It is not taboo to talk about, which means developing some kind of a policy that gets sent out to everyone, that simply sends the message, we are concerned about this issue. We are concerned about anyone who is impacted by this issue, and here are a list of resources. Another statistic that I saw, 90% of employees say company reps should be trained to recognize signs. I don't know about you, but at NBC 10 we have a safety committee, and they're all CPR certified. They're all experts in dealing with all kinds of things that could go wrong in our building, safety-wise. Why wouldn't you train people to know the signs of domestic violence as well? And if you're still saying, okay, I don't know, I'm going to help someone if they need to, but changing the culture, sounds kind of big. 74% of women who experience abuse at home also experience it at the workplace. And more than 75% of domestic violence perpetrators use the workplace to express their anger, to check up on, to pressure via email, text, phone, showing up in person. And the danger zone, just like with Wawa, the danger zone is when a domestic violence victim leaves their dangerous situation and they go to someplace safe. They assume workplace is safe too, right? But workplace is exactly the only place that the perpetrator knows where they are and when they're there. And that's the time that they become most vulnerable, their coworkers become most vulnerable, and your company becomes most vulnerable. Domestic violence extends beyond the four walls of a home. You have to include it as an issue that you have to address as a good corporate citizen, as a company that cares about its employees, all of its employees, their safety and their productivity. So I'm very happy to see all the people here today, and I wish you well. I'm sorry that I have to leave. You have great experts in the room that can help you develop whatever kind of policies, whatever kind of resource guides you need. It's not hard, and when you go back and someone says, well, how much is this going to cost? It's not going to cost anything. It's about changing a culture and expressing to people that you care. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Our next speaker is Sherry Peron. Sherry, here we go. Sherry's been an attorney for 17 years, and in that experience, she's helped many victims obtain protection from abuse orders. She's also spent more than a decade with the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. She completed the 45 hours of volunteer training and has served as a volunteer in many, many capacities, everything from answering the hotline to legal support for victims, to serving on the board of directors, and now serving on the advisory board of directors. So I am pleased to introduce Sherry Peron.
Hi, everyone. The statistics are alarming. 1 in 4 women have been the victim of domestic violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 men have been the victim of domestic violence by an intimate partner. More than 12 million people each year are affected by domestic violence by an intimate partner. In Pennsylvania alone, 60 women and 45 men were killed in domestic violence incidents in 2011. Our very county, as Tracy had spoken about before, was the location of a high-profile domestic violence murder just this past March, when Kimberly Havizda was stabbed to death by her estranged husband in the parking lot of her employer, Wawa. He had come to the workplace that night planning to kill her, and he succeeded, and a coworker found her. I am proud to be here today as a representative of the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. I'm proud because today, together, we're going to do something about domestic violence. We are going to effectuate change. Today I will speak about domestic violence, what it is, how it impacts the workplace, and what you can do about it using the very valuable free services of the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. So without further ado, what is domestic violence? Domestic violence is formally defined as a pattern of coercive behavior used by a person to gain power and control over an intimate partner or family member. It's a pattern. It's not usually a one-time thing. It's ongoing, and it's increasing in severity and frequency. It may start with name-calling, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and then escalate to property damage, and ultimately physical violence. Oftentimes, when I've spoken with a victim of domestic violence after the first incident of domestic violence, physical domestic violence, they will say to me that they can't believe that it has come to this, that their partner actually physically hurt them. And yet, as we speak, I hear stories of a past involving name-calling, accusations, and actions of a very controlling and downright stifling nature. You can see the pattern and the escalation. Domestic violence is a pattern of coercive behavior. Coercive behavior, can you hear me okay? Okay. Coercive behavior comes in many different forms. There's the physical violence that we hear about so often in the news. We hear about punching, shoving, kicking, biting, stabbing, physical restraint. But it can also come in the form of threats of violence. Threats of violence to the victim, threats of violence to the abuser himself or herself, threats of violence to a beloved family pet, to a family member, a friend, a coworker. It can also come in the form of emotional abuse, isolation from family and friends, degrading words, sleep deprivation. Coercive behavior can also come in the form of economic abuse, withholding the keys to the car, withholding money, assets, health insurance, medication. And then there's the immigration angle, withholding papers that need to be filed for residency. No matter the form, the goal of the abuser, whether the abuser is a male or a female, is control over the victim. They want the victim's submission. They believe that they are entitled to control the victim, and if the victim does not follow their rules or challenges their authority, the victim should be punished. As the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence has so aptly put it, domestic violence is a learned behavior. It is learned by the abuser through observation, experience, reinforcement, culture, family, and community. It's exacerbated by circumstances such as problems with money, a new baby on the way, drugs and alcohol. But these are more excuses for the behavior rather than the root cause. Domestic violence is reinforced when the abusers are not held accountable for their actions. And unrecognized, it can become more severe and even fatal. Tracy had alluded to this before, and it's absolutely true. Domestic violence transcends all socioeconomic classes, levels of education, occupations, religions, and races. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you went to school, whether you're a low-level man or a low-level worker or a high-level super achieving manager. We have seen poor uneducated victims, and we have seen wealthy, highly educated victims. We have seen Ken and Barbie, who to the rest of the world look like they have it all: beauty, successful careers, tons of money, big houses, great cars, beautiful vacation home, beautiful children, and yet behind closed doors there is violence. You know that saying that you can't judge a book by its cover? It's true. So what does all of this mean for employers? A lot. You heard the numbers. 1 in 4 women have been the victim of domestic violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 men have been the victim of domestic violence by an intimate partner. You are likely to have an employee in your workplace who has been the victim of domestic violence. Will you know? Maybe, maybe not. Will his or her coworkers know? They may have a suspicion, but without your help, they may not know what to do with that suspicion. The estimated cost of domestic violence is $8.3 billion each year. That cost includes direct medical and mental health care expenses and lost productivity from paid work and household chores. Lost productivity means a lot to employers, as you well know. And it can refer to a number of things. Domestic violence may cause a valued employee to be absent or tardy excessively. It may cause an employee to have to take an excessive number of text messages, emails, and phone calls while at work. It may cause an employee to be preoccupied and distracted, causing them not to exercise their best business judgment or causing them not to be as productive as they normally would be. And forget about them getting work done from home. They may not even be able to come into the workplace because the abuser won't let them or because of their injuries. Lost productivity may also occur because of coworker anxiety. Coworkers who suspect domestic violence may fear for their own safety and for the safety of the victim employee at work. And their coworkers may spend time speaking among themselves instead of seeking a solution to the problem. And then there are other costs. What if there's a domestic violence incident in the workplace? What if the abuser comes to the workplace? There could be an incident involving the abuser and the victim, and potentially other employees, and potentially other people at the workplace. The threat to the well-being of these individuals is, of course, most compelling. And then there's all that follows a domestic violence incident in the workplace. If you have a domestic violence incident and someone in the workplace should have been aware or knew that there was this possibility of domestic violence coming to the workplace, there could be negligence liability. There could be an OSHA penalty. There could be workers' compensation expenses. And even without an incident, there may be unemployment compensation payments to an employee who is justified in leaving the employment because of concerns for safety. And what about the perpetuation of abuse if we do nothing and we keep breeding more abusers, resulting in more victims? The costs keep coming. So, what can you do as an employer to help your employees and protect the workplace? Recognize that domestic violence exists and respond accordingly. Bring a committee together from HR, security, and management. Come up with a plan and put a domestic violence policy in place. Publicize that policy to your employees. Hold information sessions on that policy and on domestic violence for your employees. Provide information about our services, the services of the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, in your workplace. Make our name, the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, a household name in your office. Partner with us. Come to us and landscape and paint, fundraise, gather items for our shelter facility, collect items for our holiday party for our participants and their children. The more familiar with us that your employees are, the more likely they are to remember us if there's a domestic violence incident, and the more likely they are to come to us for help. In doing all of this, you're letting your employees know that domestic violence is not okay. You know how I said before that domestic violence is a learned behavior, that it's learned through reinforcement unless someone says that it's not okay? You'll be doing that. You'll be doing your part to say that it's not okay. And if you enact a domestic violence policy, you'll be letting your employees know that it's okay to come forward and ask for help. And that by doing so, they won't lose their job or be ostracized. So these are some of the things that you can do. But to be most effective, you really need to know what it is that we, the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, do. Our mission is to provide intervention, education, outreach, advocacy, and programs to prevent, reduce, and remedy domestic violence in Chester County. Our services include intervention in the form of a toll-free hotline. Our hotline is staffed 24/7, and it's available for victims, victims' friends, family members, coworkers, employers. It's staffed by our staff and trained volunteers, and will offer callers immediate support and counseling. We will help them with safety planning. We'll provide assessment and referral. We offer emergency shelter, a safe house for those living with an abuser or in immediate danger of abuse. Along with that shelter comes case management, service and safety planning, counseling and support groups, life skills and informational workshops, and advocacy. And we offer a minimum of 30 days of emergency shelter. We offer what we call bridge housing for those who find themselves homeless or close to homeless due to domestic violence. It's communal living, and it's available for up to 18 months. The emphasis there is on goal planning, long-term supportive services, and life skills. And again, residents have access to all of our services. And then we offer independent living through subsidized housing. We have 18 homes available for up to 2 years. And again, all of our services are available to those residents. We offer children's counseling and services, as well as adult, individual, and group counseling. We offer legal counseling, advocacy, and representation. Our legal department will provide legal option counseling as well as court accompaniment. We also provide access to custody, spousal support, child support, and bankruptcy advice. Our office works closely with law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and the Crime Victim Center to make sure that all victims are represented effectively and with compassion. And our services are free. All of our services are free. And we are there for the long haul. We will make sure that victims of domestic violence have clothing and transportation and referrals for job assistance. We even have a bilingual advocate for Spanish-speaking victims of domestic violence. We help victims with all that they need. And since 1975, we have served over 28,000 victims of domestic violence in Chester County. In the past year alone, we have served 3,400 victims of domestic violence in Chester County. And that's just us. There are agencies in all the surrounding counties to help with domestic violence. And in your handouts today, in the purple bags, you'll see there's a listing. So if you're outside of Chester County, please know that there are other agencies out there to help you. We and our sister agencies are here for your employees. And we're here for you, the employers. For the employer, invite us in. We'll answer any domestic violence questions you may have. It would be impossible to address every possible scenario in the limited time that we have here today. But if you call us and ask your question by phone or invite us in, we will answer your questions. We'll be a presence in your office. If you invite us in, we'll come to your brown bag lunches, your health fairs. We'll come in and do presentations. We'll provide your domestic violence committee with the tools that they need to help your employees. They need to know what happens when an employee comes in with a protection from abuse order. We'll help. We can give you those tools. We'll give you posters, brochures, and palm cards that you can put around your office with information on domestic violence and our hotline number. We even have peel and stick labels that you can put inside your bathroom stalls so that people can copy down our hotline number in the utmost of privacy. We'll provide your office with volunteer opportunities. You decide how much or how little you want to participate with us. But remember, again, the more familiar with us they are, the more likely they are to come to us for help. We want to be your partner in the fight against domestic violence. And all it takes is a phone call. We're here to help you and provide you with the tools that you need to have a safe and productive workplace. We hope that you'll call us and invite us in and take advantage of our services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Our final speaker today is Bert Alessia. Bert is a licensed psychologist. He is the president of HMS and vice president, EAP and Work-Life Services with Health Advocate. Bert has over 25 years of experience in the EAP field, and particularly specializing in assisting with difficult workplace situations. So now, let me introduce Bert Alessia.
Thank you and good morning. I wanted to let you know that this presentation is actually being videotaped, and it will be available to you within the next 3 to 5 business days. You can just go to the healthadvocate.com website and have access not only to the video presentation, but also the PowerPoint slides as well. We will also send out to you an email with a link to the presentation as well. I wanted to take a little bit more of a global approach and then drill down into the domestic violence, because as an employee assistance program with over 600 companies that we currently service now and about 4 million people having access to the employee assistance program, one of the most often requested workshops that we do in industry today is violence prevention seminars. It's actually number 2. Number 1 being harassment awareness training. We all know that if harassment isn't dealt with properly, it turns into violence. But I don't believe employers are doing enough. We call the training the impact in the workplace, dealing with the calm before the storm when we do the violence training. Because predicting violence in general is like trying to deal with the calm before the storm. Dealing effectively with workplace violence is really like preparing for the storm, and the time for boarding up the houses and boarding up the windows and patching up the roof isn't when the storm is upon us, but long before the storm takes place, long before we're knee-deep in water. Weathering out the storm takes a lot of planning. And the most successful plan is in place long before the storm ever comes. Organizations and individuals who work for those organizations can choose to address the potential problems or deny that they exist. And most often, people deny that they exist, thinking it just happens out there. But the reality is, violence has seeped into the workplace. Let me share with you some current statistical information. 2 million Americans are victims of workplace violence each year. We know that the annual economic cost of all workplace violence nationwide is about $121 million. The United States averages over 700 workplace homicides each year, and the leading cause of death for women at work is homicide. Homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death on the job for all workers in the United States, but it is the leading cause for women. Retail industries have both the largest number and the highest rate of worker homicides. Now, you know all that information, but 70% of American workplaces don't have a program or policy in place to address workplace violence. And when I give these statistics, when we do seminars on violence prevention, a lot of people say, what's happening to our society? What's happening to our world? But you know, you really don't have to look that far. All you have to do is turn on the television and watch the news at night. It is not uncommon for us to see on TV murders, fights, people carrying guns and knives, and this seems to be having a significant impact on our children. For instance, current statistics show that within the past 30 days, 1 in 10 eighth graders has carried a gun to school. 1 in 10. Psychiatrists studying the effects of TV violence have found that children and adults may imitate the violence that they observe on television, identify with certain characters on television. They can get away with it, so I can get away with it. They become immune to the horrors of violence, or they gradually accept violence as a way to solve problems. And there is a strong correlation in statistical analysis between substance abuse and violence. Alcohol is the drug most commonly associated with violence. Excuse the pun, but it is the shot of courage they needed to do what they needed to do. Studies published report that an average of 70% of batterers were under the influence of alcohol at the time of the abuse. Alcohol is frequently associated with violent behaviors, and studies have reflected a significant association of alcohol and workplace violence. 80% of employees believe that alcohol and other drug abuse are the leading social issues contributing to workplace violence. Women will leave an abusive relationship at least 7 times before they actually leave for good. 75% of victims face harassment from partners while at work. Tracy had mentioned some of the ways that this takes place: via emails, instant messages, gifts, driving through the parking lot looking for the victim's car. 71% of all HR and security personnel reported an incident of domestic violence had occurred on company property. According to a Maine study, among the significant findings reported by offenders, 78% of offenders used workplace resources at least once to express remorse, anger, check up, pressure, or threaten the victim. 21% of the offenders reported that they contacted the victim at the workplace in violation of a no-contact order. 48% of offenders had difficulty concentrating at work, with 19% of offenders reporting a workplace accident or near miss. And almost 50% of the victims were consistently late for work. Now, there are external factors, those things outside of the workplace, that raise the probability of stress in an organization. And while raising the probability of stress in an organization, it raises the probability that a violent act will occur. There are internal factors that raise the probability of stress in an organization. While raising the probability of stress in the organization, it raises the probability that violence will occur. Let's take a look first at the external factors, those things outside of work which raise the probability of stress, which then in turn raise the probability of violence occurring. Fragmentation of the family. The research is out there. 1 out of 2 marriages today end in divorce. Easy access to weaponry. We already mentioned TV and media. Society, drug and alcohol abuse, an unstable economy, domestic disputes that spill over to the workplace. Gavin DeBecker wrote a book, The Gift of Fear. I believe it's page 7 in that book. DeBecker says, if you filled a jumbo jet with women every month for 12 straight months and crashed that jumbo jet into a mountain and every single woman on the plane perished, it would still not equal the amount of women in the United States who are killed every year by their spouse. That's crazy. Multiculturalism. We all come from different value systems. We all come from different beliefs. And people bring those value systems and beliefs into the organization. We all, so to speak, have different value systems hats. For instance, some people come from the green cap value systems, and some people come from the red cap value systems, and some people come from the orange cap value systems. And those value systems are brought into the workplace. Here's the problem. There are some people who truly believe the way they talk to Joe on the street is the way they can talk to Joe's supervisor when they come into the organization. And they will say whatever they want, to whomever they want, in any tone they want, and they could care less if the CEO was standing right next to them. And I got some news for you. The employee is not the problem. I think organizations have to do a much better job in telling people, when you come to work, please take your green cap or your orange cap or your red cap and drop it at the front door. And when you come into our workplace, this is the cap we want you to wear when you come here. And when you leave at night, please drop our cap at the front door and feel free to put on your own cap. They got the wrong cap on. Then there are those internal factors, which raise the probability of stress, which raise the probability that a person may act out. Layoffs, downsizing, insensitive terminations. It's not termination, it's how the person is terminated. Rigid management styles, workplace stress, lack of individual responsibility. Employee does not feel as valued as their output. I always tell managers and supervisors, if the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, you treat everyone and everything like a nail. Feeling of not being heard or understood. This is the number one reason why people act out at work. They feel disrespected. They feel no one is listening to them. Multiculturalism. So I come from the green caps. What am I going to do? I'm going to find people within that organization who come from the same value systems that I do. So now we have the different cliques going on within the organization. And then office romances that go sour. And you know, we don't even have to look that far. Just yesterday, we got a call from a hospital in Buffalo, New York, where the physician came into the hospital who was dating one of the clerks in the hospital and brought her into a stairwell and shot and killed her in the hospital. Just yesterday. You look at these bullets that are up here, and bullets 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 are in the manager's complete control. How they talk to people, what they say, what their style is, making that employee feel valued, listening to them. And by listening to them and implementing some of these, we minimize the probability of stress while minimizing a potentially violent situation, because all of these factors raise the probability, which increase a situation from happening. Now, most people don't feel that they are in an abusive relationship until they come to grips with the following questions. Am I being spied on or followed? Am I being isolated from family or friends? Am I free to come and go as I please? Are my children being used as leverage? Are my finances being restricted? Am I being verbally attacked or abused? Am I being ridiculed or belittled? Now, see, what happens is this creates the ripple effect in organizations, because many people believe that domestic violence is personal and private and not a workplace issue, but this spillover is subtle and pervasive and affects lots of people, because very quickly personal problems are turned into workplace problems. Other people hear about it, the rumor mill starts, and now you have productivity decline on performance. Here are some possible signs of domestic violence. The more red flags you have in the bucket, the higher the probability that it is occurring. Whether it is stalking or inappropriate clothing for that time of the year, or frequent work absences, or unexplained bruises or injuries, or unplanned leave, or unenthusiastic responses to flowers or gifts, or anxiety or lack of concentration, or disruptive visits from the spouse or partner, or the fluctuation in work for no apparent reason, or noticeable changes in use of makeup, or the sudden change in their address, or the reluctance to divulge where they live, or the reluctance to participate in informal activities outside of work. So what I tell organizations is they start to need to do a little bit of self-reflection and ask themselves a couple questions. Do you have a violence policy in place that addresses threats? Domestic violence. Does it have resources, both internal and external? Is there consequences outlined for those people who violate it? Do we have awareness materials posted throughout the organizations, even if you put the domestic abuse hotline number in a restroom? But you know, a policy in place is not enough. Managers and supervisors need the training. And by getting the training, it decreases an organization's potential liability. When a victim leaves an abusive relationship, they enter, as Tracy said, into the danger zone. The workplace becomes this danger zone. It is the only place that the perpetrator can track the victim by showing up on the premises, waiting in the parking lot, showing up out of the blue. Leaving is the ultimate threat to the perpetrator's power and control, and it becomes 20 times more dangerous after the person leaves. In fact, in most domestic homicides, the victim has terminated the relationship. Now, here's the confusing part. Someone is considered dangerous enough to warrant a court-ordered protection. The legal system believes that the workplace is a likely location for violence to occur, but no one in the workplace has been made aware of it. Because the violence policy doesn't do anything to address it. Speak about a safety issue, because we know when they come on site, they're going to take everyone out with them until they get to who they need to get to. talk a little bit about diffusion techniques. This is about being an empathetic listener versus a sympathetic listener. Knowing what the issues are and what the resources are available to them. Listening and offering support. Making comments like, I'm afraid for your safety and the safety of your children. I'm here if and when you need me. It's not your fault. I worry about you. Is everything okay? You don't deserve to be treated this way. Sometimes they really believe they deserve to be treated that way. And then there are some planning and resources. Analyze the past incidents. Some of you may say, well, we have never had an incident. So then we're going to deal with the calm before the storm. But there's a lot of research out there that will show you incidents that happen every day in workplaces. Assess the potential for violence. That's part of creating that threat assessment team and having your security personnel involved. And assess preparedness. As I said earlier, more than 70% of the United States workplaces do not have a formal program or policy that addresses workplace violence. Here's the goal of the violence training, or even the domestic violence training, to motivate corporations to do more awareness training, since domestic violence has seeped into the workplace, to create a sense of urgency without creating a crisis. And why do organizations choose not to do training? Because it falls outside of their comfort zone. It falls outside the comfort zone of the victim, of the manager, of the employee, and they want to believe it just happens out there. There are a tremendous amount of resources that are available to you, number one being the best one, your own intuition. There has to be threat assessment teams created in organizations that are part of HR, employee relations, security, EAP. So if something happens, there's a plan in place. There's a website that I put up here, www.workplacesrespond.org. You can actually go to that website, and they have violence policies right on there, where you simply put in the name, who the contact person is, and it prints out a 15-page document for you. It's a great resource for you to have. Take all threats seriously. A threat is a threat is a threat. People become immune to people's behavior in the workplace. So let me share with you 2 examples of real-life cases that I've been involved in. We had a situation, I'll call it Company A, where they knew the woman was being abused at home, and one Monday morning she walks in and she's battered and bruised, and they decide that they want her to come to the Employee Assistance Program. So they set the appointment up for her and bring her down to visit with me. And it didn't take me long to know that she was in an abusive relationship. But she was also in denial. She didn't want the organization to know. She fell down the steps. She hurt herself. She didn't want any resources. There's nothing wrong. She didn't understand why she was there. So I simply said to her, would you come back tomorrow? Just for an hour. Just to talk. She said, sure. So she left. And at lunchtime, a limousine pulls up in front of Company A, and a man gets out of the limousine with flowers. And he asks the receptionist to talk to this lady. And the lady comes down, and he gives her the flowers, and he takes her to lunch, and she never returns to work again. She quits. She doesn't want the organization to know about her business. She wasn't ready for the help, even though the resources were there. Now, again, sometimes that may mean they may stay in the relationships because of financial concerns or emotional attachments or all this other stuff. But she wasn't ready, even though all the resources were available to her. There was another situation in Company B. We'll call the lady Mary. And she has phone conversations with her boyfriend. And these conversations are in earshot of other employees. And oftentimes the boyfriend gets loud, belligerent, angry, yelling, screaming. And one of the managers or supervisors happened to attend my training and brought this situation to my attention because he said another employee that sits next to Mary came up to him jokingly saying, "Is there a good place for me to hide when Mary's boyfriend comes in and starts shooting up the place?" And the manager said to me, "Bert, I'm really not sure how to respond to that because it was said to me in a joking manner." That's an early warning sign. That's a major red flag. But the manager's supervisor isn't aware that it's a major red flag because they never had the training. Take it seriously. Know the resources that are out there. Violence has seeped into our workplace. We deal with it on a daily basis. Thank you.
Turn the lights up. And that would be... And there's light. This is now an opportunity for questions and answers. And if we can turn the microphones on. Are they working okay? You can hear in the back? So, questions. Bill first, and you know what?
I usually don't need a microphone, but I'll take it in. Usually people are telling me to tone it down. Yeah, my name is Bill Irwin, and I'm the Corporate Security Director of Weston Solutions, which is headquartered in, my address is Westchester, but we're actually in Fraser. We have about 400 people on our campus. So I think just the statistics alone say with 400 people, there's got to be a certain percentage of that population that has personal experience with domestic violence. And I intend to take up the Domestic Violence Council of Chester County on the offer to come on our campus and help us raise the awareness, because I happen to believe there is a relationship between domestic violence and workplace violence. In fact, violence in general is becoming so pervasive that many law enforcement and security organizations, which used to view violence as three categories, and they actually labeled them this way. International Association of Chiefs of Police has three programs: violence in the home, violence in the workplace, violence in the school. Well, that's the wrong paradigm, because they all run together. And I'm really happy to see what you're doing, and I want to take full advantage of that. My comment refers to something Tracy said, which is a true statement as far as it goes, and that she said there are two kinds of companies out there. There are companies that care, and there are companies that care about the bottom line. There's, I guess, either a third category or a subcategory of the first one. There are companies out there who care and are clueless. And that is a real challenge, because it's not as simple as saying, yeah, it's the can't happen here syndrome. It's much more than that. So that is the challenge that I see for folks like me and other folks that your company will say they care, but then the next question is, okay, so what are you doing about it? And that's where I think what's happening here is very, very important. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Glassman, and I'm Vice President of Human Resources for Brandywine Realty Trust, and Bill, my husband, works with you at Weston. I'll talk to you later. A couple of things. Number one, I have a question. I am much more familiar with some of the organizations that support domestic violence in other counties, and I'm curious, Brandywine is a location. Is this on? Brandywine is a location. Our corporate headquarters are in Delaware County, but we have buildings where our tenants reside in Chester County and Montgomery County, et cetera, and Philadelphia. So my question for you is, I have two questions. Number one, if I'm interested from an HR perspective in working with you guys to bring you into our organization, number one, what does your training entail? And we actually use Health Advocate through Kistler Tiffany. So we don't use your EAP, but we use your other services, and our hotline for benefits it goes directly to Health Advocate. So I guess my question is both for Sherry and Bert. Number one, what kind of training could you provide to us? And number two, when you talk about training for managers, if you're going to come in and do a live in person, how long typically do those programs take? How much time do you spend with our employees? And then the other question relating to the multi-county issue is, if I want to refer an employee or put out materials for employees, given the fact that we're in Delaware County, should I really be referring them to DAP, or Domestic Abuse Project and Media, or should I be referring them to you, and because they may live in your area, and will you then refer them to the appropriate county resource because of where they live? Thank you.
My part's easy. Nancy Schreiner, who is my training coordinator. Nancy, would you mind standing up for a second? Nancy Schreiner is my training coordinator for Health Advocate, HMS, EAP, and she would be your point of contact for any trainings that we do. Even if you are not a client of ours under the EAP umbrella, we could still come on site to provide training services to you. We like to have at least 2 hours for the managers and supervisors in order to do the training. Now, you're going to get some push from up above saying, can you give it to me in 25 minutes? Well, we can shrink it down, but we're taking away some of the experiences. We're taking away some of the questions. So the 2 hours allows us to engage people, to bring them in, to really highlight not only the violence, but the domestic violence piece at all, and give the managers and supervisors tools that they need in order to be successful.
Okay, and I'll let Dolly tell you if she disagrees with me, but I would say you could certainly have our contact information in your office, and we would happily refer people to where they need to go, not the correct office. And as far as training, and I'm assuming that you're just speaking to training for managers, because there would be different programs we could do. We could do programs for the overall staff, educating them on domestic violence, and what resources are out there for them. But we would also have available the training for managers, and that could involve a whole menu of items, and we can let you decide how far you want to go with it. We have topics that you can choose from, starting with putting a domestic violence policy in place and setting up that committee to address that. But then having, how you communicate with a victim or a suspected victim of domestic violence, how you come up with workplace safety plans, dealing with things like, if you want to get into it, we can talk about, as far as safety planning goes, relocating offices, moving parking spaces, like things like that. So we can do whatever it is that you want us to do, and we can work within your time frame. And if you're giving us less time than we feel is necessary, we'll tell you that, and we'll give you the option of, if you want to have us back again, we can get into more depth with that. But there is a menu. So if you call us, you can pick and choose from what you want us to address. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lomonaco from the County of Chester. I have a question, I guess, Shari, it would be for you, but also for anyone else. I know that in New York State, when there's a victim of domestic violence and the police come, they had removed, excuse me, they had removed the option of an order of protection from the victim. So it's really in the law enforcement hands as soon as they come to the door. And that option had been removed. I don't know what that is in the Commonwealth, but certainly if the Commonwealth has that kind of a law on the books, is there any way that an employer, the order of protection would also be transferred to the workplace so that workplaces would know that this order extends to the workplace and have also legal bite to the fact that a perpetrator cannot come into the workplace? I mean, how does that work in the Commonwealth? It would be good to know that.
Well, what happens once the protection from abuse order is in place? It gets filed with the appropriate police departments for the areas where the victim can be found. Is the employer necessarily told? No. Would that be helpful for the employer to know? Absolutely. And that's really up to the employee to tell their employer. And that's why it's so important to have a domestic violence policy in place so that the employee knows that they're not going to lose their job or be ostracized for being a victim of domestic violence. So that you want to pull down that, you want to get rid of that stigmatism. You want them, or that stigma rather, you want them to know that they can come forward and tell you, because that's how you're going to protect the workplace.
And does the Commonwealth, though, remove that option? Sorry, does the Commonwealth remove that option from the victim when the police arrive to the door?
That is the criminal part of it. So there's the criminal, and then there's the protection from abuse order. So from the criminal perspective, if the police feel that there is probable cause for the arrest, they will make the arrest. The individual the victim is called to come to the hearing, but they may not want to testify, and the charges may be dropped. And they can still proceed with it if they have enough evidence to proceed without the proper testimony. But does that answer your?
Yeah, I guess to Bert's point about how the woman never came back to work that day.
Yes.
You would want to, in some way, I guess training is the best way, or at least awareness is an opening to the door, to let her, to let the comfort level be there with the employer to say, okay, maybe I'm not safe at home, but I know that the people at work have my back.
And this is really our point, is it doesn't help the employer to have it swept under the carpet. Like, you want to foster the environment where people can come forward and can tell you so that you can keep the workplace safe. Because you're not necessarily going to know, and it's not like you can look up the protection from abuse orders that are there. So you are really relying on your employee to come forward and tell you.
I would also say, in the situation that I presented, the employer did a good job, but they didn't really do a great job, because they're sending the person to us on a reaction. That person should have been sent to us 6 months ago. Before any bruises were ever there, there was enough red flags in the bucket to even warrant an informal referral. So at times they get into the reactionary phase, but by that time it may be too late, because the cat's out of the bag and the employee doesn't want anyone to know, and off they go. So there were some preventative steps 6 months prior that we could have at least brainstormed on what we could do to be supportive.
Morning, and thank you very much. It was very, very interesting. My comment is, or my question would be, we talked about all the things that maybe fellow staff members should say, but what about the point of, I don't want to get involved? You have a violent husband, you may be an alcoholic entering into our workplace, and name me as the person who's been supporting you. And I think that's like the other half of it.
So when we do the harassment awareness training for managers and supervisors, the managers and supervisors are held to a higher level of accountability than the average Joe employee. The law clearly states that once the person has brought something to the manager or supervisor's attention, they cannot simply sweep it under the rug. They have to do something about it. If that means getting HR involved or getting their boss involved, they must do something about it. Otherwise, they become liable as a supervisor, not the organization. The same thing holds true under the violence, so that the employee to employee doesn't necessarily have to do anything, but the employer and the supervisor who is in a leadership position is, under the eyes of the law, under a leadership position 24/7, even if it was brought up to them in a bar or outside of work. They have a responsibility to do something about it. The key to train employees on this as well as managers is that most often the employees find out about it first because it's their friend. And they can choose not to do anything about it and be part of the problem, or they can choose to do something about it and begin to be part of the solution by simply talking to someone on a confidential manner on what are the resources available to me, because I want to talk to Mary about this, but I don't want to come across as a psychologist or a social worker. So oftentimes we tell the employees, under the eyes of the law, you don't have to do anything about it. But harassment and violence are not I issues, they're we issues, and it will impact your organization, and you never want to be playing Monday morning quarterback with this stuff.
And, you know, one of the things that we talk about is having a domestic violence committee in the workplace. And with that committee, you really want to establish the proper chain of reporting so that it's being reported by somebody who may feel uncomfortable with it, but all they're doing is depositing the information with someone who is comfortable dealing with it. So it's important. I'm sorry?
Hello, my name is Molly Neese. I'm a coach, consultant, and trainer with Westchester University. And I just challenge all of you in this room to see what your list can be, that what you're going to do when you leave this room. I have a list of 15 things. What are you going to do? And it can be as simple as 1 out of every 4. Do you know, or in a domestic violence, post it on Facebook. And then when that video link comes out, you put that with it. Because right there, you are saying that you're an advocate for you, whoever that you may be. So just keep that in mind. I just want to plug that in. Also, video. We do a lot of video things at Westchester. Please come. We'll tape you. We'll film you. You can make it viral for all of your network, too. Because this is what we need to be thinking about. What do we have that we can give to others so we can make a difference? So my question is, where can we get that sample policy language? You said it's very easy. I don't like reinventing the wheel. Where might we find that?
You can go to that website, www.workplacesresponse.
Correct.
.org, I believe it is. Okay. Put that back up. You can do that. You can work with us. There are other websites. I believe the Liz Claiborne website also has a sample policy. You can pick and choose and put together the policy that addresses everything that you want. But you'll find a number of them online.
Let me do 2 things. First, answer your question about law enforcement in Pennsylvania, because I am one. If you are called to a domestic violence situation and you see evidence of an assault, you shall arrest. That is the only time a police officer is required to arrest without a warrant. Otherwise, he has to get a warrant. You shall arrest. The idea there was to take the victim out of the environment until they can get a PFA or something else can happen. But like you mentioned, many times the victim won't show up and testify, and if you do not have a victim, you don't have a crime. So that charge is going to be dropped. The other thing is, the reason I'm here was to get some information about approaching 2 large employers in my municipality about suggesting this. And to some employers, this is a taboo subject. You walk in there, it's not our problem. How do you suggest I approach these companies? Or do you have a suggestion in approaching them? From a law enforcement, they're going to get a knock on the door from me and the CEO, and I'm going to talk about this with this information. How do you suggest I approach them? Or do you have a suggestion?
I think it was George Santayana, that Harvard professor, that said education will never be as expensive as ignorance. One of the ways that I talk to organizations, because it's usually about the bottom line, and the CFO or somebody there says, we don't have the time for this, and we don't have the money, and we don't have the resources. So I often go into the organization, telling the CFO how we're going to reduce your potential liability. I have a good idea on how we're going to reduce your potential liability. Then their ears perk up like a Doberman, because they're always interested in reducing potential liability. Because the reality is, your managers and supervisors probably do a real good job, but they probably lack the interpersonal skills, and you have a policy in place, or maybe you don't have a policy in place, which increases your potential liability, and then you don't have any training to support the policy, which increases your potential liability. So you can leave your liability out there, or you can begin to take a look at it, and here are some proactive organizations right in Chester County that are doing some things about it, and you don't want to be the one on the front page of the Daily Local that your organization had an incident there and you did not proactively do anything about it, because then it gives the organization a black eye. So I'm always addressing it more as reducing liability. I always use those words. The HR people love it, and I don't have to use reduced liability with my HR employee relations folks. I have to use it with my CFO folks, because that's all they're really interested in, is the bottom line.
And you can also tell them that our services are free. So that may help.
Hello, my name is Cindy. I'm an HR manager, and I do have one of those companies where I'm always the one like, oh, there she goes again. She's worrying about this, or we don't have to worry about that. And it's very difficult to change the whole culture of a company. But it's funny. We signed up to come to this seminar, which has been very informative, a couple weeks ago. And over the last week, I have been put into a situation where I'm not quite sure how to deal with things, and today has really helped me with that. And maybe you can help me further. In April, we hired a new employee, and over the last week, it has come to my attention that their husband is sitting out in the parking lot in the car all day long watching videos. And over the last few days, or over the last week, has frequently been coming in and out of our establishment to use the bathroom and so forth. Now, people are coming to me, they're freaked out about this, like people are sitting in the car in the parking lot. I'm not sure if he's breaking any laws. I don't know that he's interfering with anybody at this point, but I am heightened. Some of my coworkers are heightened as to how to deal with it. Some people have even asked her or approached her about that, and she's very defensive of him and very supportive of him. Visiting, comes, brings her coffee. They go to lunch. But it's just very bizarre to all of us that work that he comes and sits in this car for 8 hours watching videos in 90-degree weather without a hot week. And I'm like a one-man band. Kelly helps me, but nobody seems to get the basics of this, let alone something at this level. So I didn't know if you could help me. I definitely would like to have you come and help us out on an overall scale, but maybe give me some advice as to what my legal rights are to have him not come to our establishment on a daily basis. And he does have to walk past my office to get to her office. So I didn't know who he was at first, because we have a lot of people that come in and out. It's a very public place. So now we kind of keep track of how many times he's coming and going. So if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate that.
So it goes back to that slide on the ripple effect, where that person's things that are happening outside of work are not only impacting her, but now you got employees who are coming to work in the morning saying, oh my gosh, is Jane's husband going to be in the parking lot again? And how am I going to deal with it? And how often does this have to go on? And they're looking at HR. What's HR going to do about this? And so the first thing that I kind of look at it as a pilot light. And so we're going to keep the pilot light down on low, but we're going to begin to have to turn that pilot light up a little bit, because sometimes the employee will not do anything until they get a little fire under their butt. You got to sting them a little bit. But what you can do is, the first question to ask yourself is, who in a management position is the best person to talk to this person? Because I'm not convinced it's the immediate supervisor. The reason for that is, if the only time the supervisor is bringing the employee into their office is when they're doing something wrong, and now all of a sudden they care about them, what message is the organization sending out? So I would take a step back and say, who's the best person in a management position to talk to that person? I think that the HR person should be in that conversation, but not necessarily do much of the talking for the first go-round. You're there more to be supportive and address the policies and things like that. I think that one slide that I shared, things that you can say to a victim that, I'm concerned about you, I'm concerned about our safety here. Are you aware that, that this is occurring, it's becoming a daily problem here? I would definitely get your legal involved. I would call your legal and say, look, we got to have something in place where we just can't have people parking their cars in our parking lot who don't work here, who are there for hours and hours. And so we need to use the legal side of it to get the person off the premise. I would say to this employee, we can do this one of two ways. I'm going to ask you to talk to your husband or your spouse, or I can send security out there to talk to him, but it's going to get done. So what works best for you? At the same time, you have to be sensitive to this person, because you don't want her going home and getting beaten up, right? So it's this fine line, but you have a bigger concern. Your concern is the safety of the entire organization. Yes, the safety of the employee is there, but the safety of the organization and the message that the organization sends out, they're waiting for you to do something. And every day that we wait, we kind of have a ticking time bomb here. And people's anxiety levels continue to go up just by looking at the building or seeing the car in the parking lot. So there's a game plan that you can put in place. But I think when I say turn the pilot light up, eventually it's going to have to be turned to medium or possibly high, and it's got to be dealt with on her side from a performance standpoint if the performance is affected. If it's not affected, it becomes more of the policies and procedures we have with people who are parking their cars on our lot who don't work here, who are not visitors. That's where you go to legal to get that support that you need. And oftentimes, if you tell that person to leave and they leave and it goes away, great, but if they come back, if the lawyer sends them a letter on the legal letterhead of the lawyer that says, this is to inform you that if this occurs again, we may have to take appropriate legal action, sometimes that in and of itself will stop. We have a law enforcement in the room. It is my opinion that showing law enforcement is the biggest deterrent, one of the biggest deterrents in domestic abuse taking place.
I don't know where my line is.
I would recommend two things. First, as you said, showing law enforcement, contact your police department. You want to step up preventive patrol. You want a cruiser going through that. And then after, they see him twice, they're going to approach anyway on their own and say, what are you doing? The other thing is your property can be posted authorized personnel only. He's not authorized. Yeah, that's when you want to. That's right. That's security.
Right. But he brings up an excellent point. By partnering with law enforcement in your area, they can at least have the cruiser come by and notice this person, and after the second time say, what's going on? Like, you just can't park your car here. And, the guy shows up and, leaves and comes back in an hour. They're going to say, I told you once, if you come back again, we're going to have a little bit of a problem. The show of law enforcement in and of itself is the biggest deterrent.
So you think I should do that? Do we do that with or without approaching it with her first? Do we not approach
I would talk to her and address it as a safety issue. We are concerned about what's going on here, and we notice that your husband has been parking his car for 1,000,000 hours in front of our building. It can't happen. Can you take care of this issue? See what she says. If she says, no, he's a bully and he's not going to listen to me, well, then we're going to have to take care of it.
She's been in the building 2 months. So
Right.
We don't really know, have a history of anything to deal with it. So it's new to me, the person. Thank you.
I think there's questions over here.
Hi, Sandy Lewis, Domestic Violence Center Director of Counseling. I think you've got a very fragile situation. Never want to put that woman in the position, nor that agency dealership. Because a few years ago, some of you might remember, on Route 113 in a real estate office, we had somebody came in and shut up the whole place. So if it looks like the agency or the dealership is in cahoots with this. I like what the officer said over here, because that's outside of the realm of, first of all, the wife, and outside of the realm of this particular dealership. Just because it can just cruise by and say, sir, see, you're sitting here several days. I like that. And also to go back to the fact of someone up here asked about employees. When someone comes to you as a fellow employee with, and you recognize that there's something going on that could be potentially very harmful as domestic violence happening, I don't think that anyone has to particularly be involved. I think all you have to do is say to them there are some resources available for you that are free, strictly confidential. And I can put you in touch with him now if you like. You can talk to him on the phone here where the phone number can't be traced. Because at the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, we're the specialists in this field. We know about safety. We're there to help you. I don't think that every employee can know every avenue of how to treat every situation, because what we know that safety plans are very much individualized, and it's extremely fragile. It sounds like to me you have an extremely fragile situation, and sometimes it makes conferring with human resources, if you have that, along with law enforcement, because if she goes home and suggests anything to him, he could not only kill her, he could come back because he's going to be very angry at you for reporting it. So I think it's very fragile. I like what you said, sir, because I think that to put it on the law enforcement and not on anyone else to begin with would be a starting place.
I would also make sure that you keep your supervisor informed of whatever your intended course of action is so that you feel supported. You have to escalate their anxiety level that this is a concern and I'm worried about this and it's a safety issue and we need to do something and I need your support on what we're doing.
Hi there. My name is Seth Schreiner. I'm from Westchester University and the Labor Relations Department. My question was, I was concerned about if you could go a little further in depth about the violence policies that address threats.
So let me just back up a little bit. I talked about the different value systems caps that people wear. And I always say a threat is a threat is a threat. So 2 months ago, I'm on an airplane headed from Jacksonville back to Philadelphia. The plane is delayed. The passengers are getting angry. I happen to be one of those people that's getting a little angry, but anger is a human emotion. It's how you display that anger which gets people in trouble, by the way. So the guy that's sitting next to me is really, really upset because he needed to be in Philadelphia 5 hours ago, and he had all his flights changed, and he's frustrated. And he says to the stewardess, I took the flight from Philly to Jacksonville, and it was the bumpiest ride I've ever taken on this stinking airline. This better be a smooth ride to Philly, because if it isn't, there's going to be hell to pay. It probably took 30 seconds for that passenger to be taken off the aircraft. 30 seconds. Maybe someone in here could help me understand how a person can make that comment one time in an airport or on an airplane and be carted off. But there are some employees who make those comments every single day in the workplace. I know that's just Bert. That's the way he blows off steam. There are 3 threats that you need to be aware of: the hidden threats, the conditional threats, and the direct threats. And a hidden threat would be something like, there's going to be hell to pay, or one of these days we're going to settle a score, or don't you ever turn your back on me. And then there's those conditional threats where an employee may say something like, you know, this place would be a mess if the mainframe crashed and the backups were damaged. You don't do anything about it because it wasn't direct. And so I go back and say a threat is a threat is a threat, and somebody needs to make sure that they have the right cap on in the organization, that you cannot talk that way in this organization, and if you talk that way again, you will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including possible termination. The employee is not the problem. People have become immune to that person's behavior over a long period of time. That's the problem that we run into. Direct. We all know direct, right? Let me just say something about the direct. You got some people in the organization who, you know, you'll ask somebody to do something for you, and for whatever reason they get tied up, they do something else. And then they come back and say, hey, did you get that stuff copied for me? And the person says no. And you say, you know what? I could just kill you. Like, I'll just do it myself. You mean anything by it? Now, you ask somebody to do something for you, another manager, supervisor, and the person comes back and says, did you do that for me? And the manager, supervisor says, the person says no. And the manager, supervisor says, I could just kill you. First scenario, I didn't mean anything by it. Second scenario, well, we better get a psychiatric evaluation in here. We don't know what's going on. We got a loose cannon. See, if we extinguish the word kill in our environment, it doesn't become an issue. But organizations aren't thinking that way. They're thinking, Jane's only joking, but Bob needs the psychiatric evaluation. That's where we run into problems with directness at times. There are certain words in an organization that are taboo, and kill is definitely one of them.
Hi, Jessica Hefner from O&J Roberts School District. I just want to make 2 comments. One is the book, The Gift of Fear. If you have not read it, I read it in graduate school in a school and workplace violence course. It was required reading. Everybody in this room should read it, and if you have an adult or young adult child, I highly recommend that they read it as well. The second topic is, It has to come from the top down. And HR people regularly feel threatened. I've had people come in my office and tell me, if you don't do what I want, I will make your life miserable. And I don't have a problem saying, is that a threat? And I don't have a problem saying, we're going to discipline you for your inappropriate interaction today. However, you have to have support regardless of what situation you're in and what organization you work for, whether it's public or private, from the very top to carry that through, or those behaviors will continue. And the people that are like that in the workplace are highly likely to be like that outside the workplace as well.
Any other questions? Not seeing any hands. Well, I want to thank our panel. Dolly Weidman-Scott, our CEO, Bert, Sherry, thank you very much. Sorry Tracy couldn't be here for the end with us, but I will close with, again, thanking you. I hope that you have made your lists of things that you can do when you get back to make your environment safer, and I hope that you will have on that list partnering with the Domestic Violence Center to help do that. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.